Welcome everyone for our last meeting of the semester of the academic year, which has been our first academic year at the Black Hole Initiative, and we are very happy. It was a very productive year, and so starting next week we are entering into the summer mode where we will not meet for the colloquium, but we will still have some activities here which you can monitor on the DHI website. Another important comment is about the conference that we will have in 2 weeks. So the conference will be exactly 2 weeks from now on Monday and Tuesday, May 8th and 9th. And anyone wanting to participate should register. There will be a banquet on Monday night, and there might be another event that Bill will be in touch with us about. That should be a very festive event, this conference, because it's celebrating the first year of the Black Hole Initiative. There will be people coming from around the world, and a series of talks that are quite exciting on physics, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. So all fields will be represented. And for today's program, I'd like to ask Runa to introduce our speaker.
It's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today, Professor Abhay Ashtekar. So Professor Ashtekar is the Everly Professor of Physics over there at Penn State. And ever since Professor Ashtekar got his PhD at Chicago, has had a stellar career in various parts of the world. And of course, probably he's most famous, especially with younger folks, for spawning off the entire field of quantum gravity. But today, Professor Ashtekar is going to tell us about his work in relativity, particularly about dynamical horizons and what we can learn about physics in both the classical and the quantum physics. Thank you, Professor.
So it's a pleasure to be here, and I was told that because the goal of the initiative, that the audience will be quite diverse, and so I try to make a talk which is going to be quite general, and I'm going to tell you, give you a broad overview of developments. It starts quite early, so that everybody is on the same platform, and then up to now, and even things which people are working in, I just bring conjecture. As I was already asked, what is the color code here? A lot of people are contributed here. The one in red are people working in geometric analysis. In blue are the people who are working both in classical mathematical relativity and in mathematical quantum gravity. The green ones are the gravitational wave people, and the black ones are the numerical relativists. So this brings in all these disciplines together, and that's what I would like to tell you about. So this is a preamble, as I already mentioned. This area of dynamical black holes, they are actually described by quasi-local horizons, and this area brings together conceptual issues in philosophy of science, also geometric analysis in terms of existence, uniqueness, mathematical properties, and then also numerical relativity and some issues in quantum gravity. So the talk has these 4 parts: quasi-local horizons, this very introduction as to why do we need them, what are they? Secondly, properties, and thirdly, the final state. The third part is kind of where people are still thinking about developing ideas, both in classical and quantum domains, and then very brief summary. So why? Well, normally we think of black holes in terms of event horizons, and the textbook definition is really the following: that you consider, there's a collapsing star, and there's a collapses from the singularity, and then there is the event horizon appear. The standard definition is that you look at future null infinity, that is chi plus, and then you look at all of its past, and that is called j minus of chi plus. So you look at that, and then you look at its future boundary, and that is the event horizon. And this is the definition, and this is what one uses in all the mathematical work. Quite a long time ago, more than 40 years ago, I realized, about 40 years ago, Galois and Horowitz pointed out that, of course, for this definition to be useful and to describe a black hole, the future null infinity should be complete. Because if you only have part of null infinity and look at all its past, then you will not. Even Minkowski space can have a black hole because you just take Minkowski space and just look at a part of null infinity and look at its path. Of course, then that will have a boundary and that will be a black hole. So its completeness is important. And this will conceptually is important towards the end of the talk. So this is what we use, but there are limitations. First is there is too global. One needs to know the entire future development because we're not just putting some boundary condition of asymptotic flatness, but we need to know what is the entire past of future null infinity. And secondly, it is teleological. So for example, the event horizon might be forming in this room right now in anticipation of a gravitational collapse which will happen in the center of the galaxy, a billion years from today. And this is illustrated in this Penrose diagram of so-called exact solution of Vaidya solution. It's a spherical symmetric solution, in which a black hole is formed by throwing in null fluid. So here, this part of the space-time is completely flat. This Minkowski space, nothing is happening up here. And then over here, I start throwing in a null fluid, perfect null fluid, and it has some profile, and I make it so that the total mass that goes in is m0. The Schwarzschild black hole is formed, the total mass is m0 up here, at the final end up here. And what you see up here is that in this region, space-time is Minkowski, which is completely flat. And yet, the past of null infinity is this region. This is the event horizon. And you can see that the event horizon started forming in Minkowski space, not only forming in Minkowski space, but growing in Minkowski space, in anticipation of the fact that in future, something was coming in up here. And this is kind of, so in particular, this growth of the event horizon has nothing to do with the physical process that is taking place anywhere near here. I mean, this could be billions and billions of years. And yet, the event horizon is slowly growing up here. So, one of the notions, so these are the limitations, that's why we want to go further. And the idea here is to use so-called marginally trapped surfaces. So what is this thing? So here is a two-sphere, this arcing plane, so everything is a two-sphere. And these are the light rays which are going out, and these are the light rays which are falling in. As you go out, R increases, so it's clear that this light front is expanding and this light front is contracting. The expansion of outgoing light front is positive and incoming is negative. So this is what happens normally. But in the black hole region, both light fronts are contracting because R is actually decreasing. This R equals 0 up here. And so on a boundary up here, we can have what is called the marginally trapped surfaces, in which the outgoing light front is frozen. It doesn't expand. So in this region, for example, the R is equal to 2m, so it doesn't expand. But the incoming one, of course, is contracting, is falling here. And so therefore, you can think of it as an instantaneous boundary of the region in which light is trapped.
Can you comment on the difference between that and the apparent horizon?
Yeah, there are two notions of apparent horizons, so let me just be quick and we'll talk later. But usually, apparent horizons in both those notions are actually tied with a space-like Cauchy surface. So for example, one Schwarzschild, you can do a foliation so that there is no apparent horizon at all. So whereas the statement up here is that these marginally trapped surfaces are just, you give me two-dimensional surface and I just look at it, I don't want to embed it anywhere. I can tell that it's a marginally trapped surface. So, as I already said, in Vaidya space-time, early on the event horizon forms and grows in the flat space-time, and therefore, and this can be very, very far removed. The marginal trapped surfaces here are here, they are formed up here, and they can be very far removed from the event horizon. This one. So, the marginally trapped surface gives us a quasi-local way of talking about black hole region. And so what we do is, we define a quasi-local horizon as follows. It's a three-dimensional manifold, for example, this manifold over here, which is just, we don't worry about, you don't need to talk about these space-like surfaces. I've drawn them in order to compare them with apparent horizon, if you like. So on this, so the statement up here is that it's a three-dimensional surface which is foliated by marginally trapped surfaces. So that one of the expansions, sort of, along the outgoing expansion is 0, and the ingoing expansion up here is negative. So that is what a marginally trapped surface is. So in this picture up here, for example, this is the locus of the marginally trapped surfaces that we can get up here. So here, the null fluid fell in up to here, and then we stopped. And then this world tube of the marginally trapped surfaces joins onto the event horizon. Whereas on the last slide, this doesn't stop, and therefore the world tube of the marginal horizon, marginally trapped surfaces goes all the way up here. So these three-dimensional surfaces are all what are called dynamical horizons. In astrophysical, I have to say that because this is a half an hour talk, so I'm skipping some subtleties and also some generalizations. But broadly, quasi-local horizons that are relevant to classical general relativity, numerical relativity, and astrophysics, if they are either space-like or null. If it is space-like, then we call it dynamical horizon or space-like dynamical horizon. And in this case, one can show that the area of these marginally trapped surfaces necessarily increases. If it is null, like here, then it is called isolated horizon, nothing falls across it, and then the area of this marginally trapped surfaces is constant. So area is constant up here, and killing horizons are a very special case of these isolated horizons. So in particular, you'll be relieved to know that in flat space, there are no quasi-local horizons. So in this room, there is no dynamical horizon that is forming in ruin. So that is a very quasi-local thing that we discuss up here. Okay, so this finishes the first part. What about properties of a quasi-local horizons? So existence and uniqueness up here. So let's supposing we're going to smooth space-time. This is for geometric analysis people if they are in the audience, and suppose that this what we have is really a foliation. So therefore we have a space-like surface and it intersects this horizon, this the quasi-local horizon on some surface S here. R is the radius of this surface, the area radius of the surface. So you call this stably outermost marginal trapped surface if in fact it has the properties is a trapped surface, and if in fact you go a little bit outside, then the expansion becomes positive. In other words, it becomes untrapped. So that is the definition up here, and then these are just generic conditions that one uses. And then there is existence theorem that supposing you're going to space-like surface like that, and on that you find such a marginally trapped surfaces. If this is the outermost, then one would call it apparent horizon. So if you have such a marginally trapped surface up here, then there is a theorem which says that a little bit, at least locally, you can grow, and in fact the dynamical horizon will exist using Einstein's equation.
Are you saying they could be nested?
They can be nested.
They can be nested.
They can be nested.
I see.
They can
So
be
you're
nested.
only
They
looking
can
at the
be-
outermost.
Yeah, therefore, astrophysically one looks at the outermost ones. Exactly.
And in the context of cosmology, what is the structure that we have for the sitter, for example?
Yeah. So for the sitter, basically those horizons are all isolated horizons. So there's null and that is isolated horizons, and they're also actually very useful there. That's another application, but I will not talk about it today. So they were this existence, so they exist. And the point is that if you look at the outermost ones on this, then the statement is that they can go finite number of jumps. The outermost one is here, and then after a while, suddenly there is the outermost one is here, like two black holes colliding. Then I got these out. Then suddenly there will be an outermost there, and then so they can jump. But then the powerful theorem said that only a finite number of jumps. What about uniqueness? So as Ramesh already anticipated, they are not unique. They can be nested and so on. But one question is the structure of the dynamical horizon unique? And the answer is yes. The foliation of these marginally trapped surfaces is indeed unique. So if you give me one of these dynamical horizons, then you cannot come and find these marginally trapped surfaces, and I cannot come and find those marginally trapped surfaces. There's only a unique one up here. And then the ones in numerical relativity that people talk about, such as these ones, they cannot bifurcate. And then if a space-time admits the event horizons, then there is an outermost dynamical horizon, which actually, unique one, which will actually become tangential to the event horizon. So there are such nice properties of these dynamical horizons. Now what about laws of black hole mechanics? Now key property of the event horizons was Hawking's theorem that their area cannot decrease. And this served as the key to the black hole thermodynamics. However, it's a qualitative event, qualitative result. It doesn't tell us how the area increases. Does it increase in response to matter falling in or something else, or etc. And furthermore, it cannot do that because we have this Weidler example. We see that this is Minkowski space, nothing is happening here. And yet the area of this horizon is increasing from r equal to 0 to some r equal to some other value up here, it is increasing up here. So that is the problem. But for the space-like dynamical horizons, one can do better. Not only does the area increase, I already said, but we can give an attribute this increase in area to physical processes happening locally there. So here is a law that was proved some while ago, Namely, you've got a dynamical horizon like that up here, and supposing you give me two of these surfaces, marginally trapped surfaces. Here I got a area radius R2, area radius R1 up here. By that I mean the area here is 4 pi R1, R2 square and 4 pi R1 square. Then the difference between them is given by the stationary tensor plugged with this null vector and a unit future directed time-like vector which is perpendicular to this horizon, plus some quantities which are positive definite. The first term on the right-hand side can be thought of as being the energy flux across this region into the dynamical horizon due to matter, as so to say measured by this null vector, the preferred null of vector field that we got up here, whose expansion is 0. And the second term, good reasons to believe, are given to justify that this is really the energy that is carried by the gravitational waves that is falling across the horizon. Now, the interesting thing is that normally, if you just draw a random surface in space-time and ask me how much energy gravitational waves carry across it, answer is I don't know. It's not a gauge invariant quantity. But amazingly, it happens that if you have got a dynamical horizon, then all those ambiguities disappear, and in fact, there's a formula which is gauge invariant and tells you the answer. And the right-hand side up here is manifestly positive. The dominant energy condition holds. And therefore, the growth of the marginally trapped surfaces is really governed by local flux of energy. And the interesting thing for geometric analysis people is that this formula comes directly from the Gauss-Karazi equations, which are the constraint equations on this space-like surface. So it is the constraint equations of Einstein's theory which govern how the black hole grows, which is slightly counterintuitive but very interesting. So this was the second law. What about the first law of black hole mechanics? So is delta m is given by delta A plus omega delta J. Normally this is proved for killing horizons, as black holes make a transition from a stationary state to a nearby stationary state. We cannot just integrate this and tell us how much mass changes by in general, because this is all killing one stationary state to another stationary state nearby one, and these quantities depend on J and A. So J and the area up here. Therefore, I cannot just simply directly integrate this formula in a simple way unless you give me a path. But on a dynamical horizon, you do have a path because you've got a nested family of these surfaces, and therefore you can integrate them all. And we find that in fact the mass at this later time minus the mass in the former time associated with the dynamical horizon is given by the integral of kappa dA plus omega dJ. And the left-hand side here is really the flux of the energy that is falling into the dynamical horizon, which was given up here, this energy that was falling into the dynamical horizon. So basically, the dynamical horizons provide stronger laws of black hole mechanics.
Is kappa constant on
the kappa is constant just on the surface.
On that surface, the dynamical horizon.
The dynamical horizon. But I think it is defined in such a way that instantaneously you think of this as being embedded in curved space-time and you associate the value. So here it is constant, but here is another constant, another constant.
Right, but at in any slice, the entire surface will have the same kappa.
So, but that, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
We assign it. So it is not obvious that in fact, that with this assignment you will get this to be.
Oh, there's an axisymmetry.
These are axisymmetric.
Ah, okay.
These are all axisymmetric.
Okay.
The first time it was not, but now it is. Now this is the last part, which is to do with the, which is what people are thinking about now. So in view of the black hole uniqueness theorems, one expects that the final equilibrium state of a black hole formed by collapse or binary mergers should be curved. But in what sense is it curved? Because you've got some gravitational waves. I mean, in general, you've got some gravitational collapse or binary black hole mergers. So there's going to be radiation that is going out to infinity. It's a dynamical process going out all the way to infinity. And so, of course, it can't be globally curved. But what we hope is that it is the horizon geometry that tends to the curved horizon geometry. So the black hole itself is like a curved black hole, although there is radiation outside. By the way, the uniqueness theorems assume that space-time is stationary, so there is no radiation at all. But we expect that the horizon geometry should have this property. So precise statement should be possible in terms of the intrinsic horizon geometry. In numerical simulations, when a common apparent horizon first forms, so it is what happens, namely you've got a common marginally trapped surface, which actually includes the two two black holes that I got, other two marginally trapped surfaces. Its geometry and angular momentum structure is generally very complicated. That the common apparent horizon is not simple and smooth. I mean, it's smooth, but it's very wiggly and it's very complicated structure up there. But very soon, it settles down to the curve values. So the question is, can we have some, first of all, there is a characterization in terms of this isolated horizons as to what the curve horizon is, and we see that these locally defined fields on the dynamical horizon become the fields on this isolated horizon. This is isolated because area is not increasing, and this is null, LA is tangential to it. This is dynamical, it is space-like. LA up here is here, NA is up here is here, it is space-like. So it settles down to the curve, and then you can look at the geometry up here, intrinsic curvature quantities you can evaluate there, and in fact you can test that the final state is actually curved. So can we understand how this dynamical horizon, which has an extremely complicated structure, if you like hair, that is because it is actually following, it is a lot of information that is going in up here, it all gets ironed out, and it actually becomes the curved dynamical horizon. So to understand this, a while ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we introduced a notion of multiple moments of this dynamical horizon. So on each marginally trapped surface, there is two sets of multiple moments, the mass ones and the angular momentum of the current ones, which actually characterize the intrinsic geometry and angular momentum structure at that instant of time. They change as time goes on. And the idea is that they are actually, and simulations show that they actually change, so that ultimately we get the curve moments up here. So how does this happen? That is a question that we would like to know. And this is something that is, I personally think that there is actually some universal behavior in which all this hair is lost. And it will be very nice to find this universal behavior for various reasons up here. So this is what it is. But now, very recently, people have been thinking that maybe this information about how the hair is lost would even be captured into what happens at infinity. And these are numerical people and these are gravitational wave people. And what they think about is the following: that once the common horizon is formed, and then there's a lot of this radiation that happens up here. The peak of the radiation happens after the common horizon is formed, in the black hole collisions. And so the statement is that you're sending out this radiation. This radiation comes out of a region just outside the black hole where there is a potential wave. So this actually goes out to infinity, but some of it also falls into infinity. And the idea of these people is that in fact there is a correlation between what goes out and what goes in. But what goes in is the information, is the external input, which is ironing out the hair. You know, to begin with, it's very complicated, crumpled, and it gets smoothened out. Why does it get smoothened out? The formula that we have for dynamical horizon multiple moments tell us that is because of the gravitational waves that are falling in up here. So we should be able to actually, so that is what is happening here. So these waves are smoothing out multiple moments. These waves are carrying out the information, carrying away the information to infinity. And the vision here is that they originate up here, and there's a correlation, and so one should be able to read off this behavior, the decay of the dynamical horizon. There is people are actually working right now in showing that in fact there is information here in the outgoing waves that can be directly read out, which will tell us what the mass and angular momentum of individual black holes was, which fell in. So this is a very interesting thing that is going on right now. And this is called the idea of screens, that there is a screen here and there is a screen at infinity, and there are correlations between them. Now I'll come to the very last part, which is look with quantum theory. Because these ideas are also used very key to understanding the whole issue about black hole evaporation, information loss, and so on. So, but to understand this process quantum mechanically, we should really form a black hole out of some field that we control, and then we should also look at radiation, not only of gravitational waves, but also of that field. It should be a closed system. So supposing we actually make a black hole with a scalar field or something like that, which falls in from infinity, makes a black hole appear. Then a dynamical horizon forms. During the collapse, the dynamical horizon is space-like, because its area is increasing, its mass is increasing. And supposing there is no more black hole, no more infalling radiation, in which case, in classical theory, this will be just the whole space-time, there will be singularity up here, and then the statement is that you will have Schwarzschild region up here. But of course, if you include the back reaction, then the statement is that in fact, what happens is that the dynamical horizon turns space-like. Space-like. It turns time-like, and therefore, and then it shrinks in area. The space-like one grows in area, this shrinks in area, and as time goes on up here. So the two aspects of this time-like boundary that are important. One is that the area is shrinking, that just follows from the fact that it's time-like. And secondly, the signals can easily now come out. You see, if this dynamical horizon were space-like, then the signals cannot come out because both null cones up here, null rays up here are in this direction. So future directed things are like that. But if dynamical horizon becomes time-like, then in fact things can come out. So maybe information can leak out up here, things can come out of this dynamical horizon. But there is an obvious problem. So first of all, that sort of relieves us because things can come out. But there is an obvious problem, namely, even if you look at the semi-classical region, where back reaction is included, we forget about quantum gravity region, and we suppose that somehow quantum gravity is going to resolve the singularity, and this is the quantum region that I don't know much about, and this is a semi-classical region that I can mathematically control, then we can look at this region up here, and what we know is that in fact, this by the time a solar mass black hole shrinks to a lunar mass black hole to a 1,000 or 10,000 times Planck scale black hole, this takes a huge amount of time, and during this time, in fact, all kinds of correlations are lost. The mores fall into the black hole, more go out to infinity, and the correlations between them are lost. So the question is really, information can leak out, but by now, the black hole has an area which is only about 10 to the 3 or 10 to the 4 Planck mass, Planck radii, Planck length, and then the statement is that how can so much information stay up here? And this is the last part that I want to say. Well, how could a lot of information be stored in an object with so little mass? So let us investigate this semi-classical geometry and see what happens. The simplest model, we can assume that this semi-classical geometry is given by the White space-time because there is a negative energy flux across the dynamical horizon, which is shrinking it and which is reducing the mass. And we take this flux to be the Hawking flux, use the same formula for the rate of change of the mass along the dynamical horizon with respect to this retarded advanced coordinate V up here. So we just take the standard formula up here, and then suppose we form a solar mass black hole perhaps, and consider two surfaces, one inside the dynamical horizon, one with radius, when the radius of the horizon is only a millimeter, which corresponds to a black hole of about mass of a moon. So to begin with, it has a solar mass, and by here it has the mass of moon, and by here it has the area is shrunk to about 10 to the 3 Planck length, so its mass is about 10 to the 3 to the 4 Planck masses. So what happens here? Well, what happens is that these surfaces, they become surfaces with extremely long necks. So to begin with, we've got a space-like surface, r equal to constant here up here, say here. We've got a space-like surface like that, and then here's the dynamical horizon, and you can just fill it in. But as you go further and further in time, this space-like surface starts dipping. It develops long necks. So you say, yeah, they develop long necks. How long? And this is the shocking part. By the time you reach the mass of a moon, this length of this throat is 10 to the 55 light years. We start with the solar mass black hole. By the time we reach 10 to the 3 Planck length, it is 10 to the 79 light years. So there are huge tubes that are there. And because of this, there is ample room there for lot of modes of extremely long wavelength, so that the total energy is still very small. So here the total energy is still moon energy. Here the total energy is still the energy of about 10 to the 3 times Planck, or 10 to the 4 times Planck mass. Very small energy, but because of this extremely long wavelength modes, there can be enough modes there that there could be this information which is really gone out to infinity could actually be stored. So, can I just finish one line and please? And so now the question is really, what happens to this information in this quantum region and so on, that we know much less about. But people are now studying more carefully just the semi-classical region up here,
and trying to make the argument I gave just now more precise. Please.
Is there a way of quantifying and to give an estimation why this is enough to store the information?
Yeah, so you can just look at the number of modes, would say. At any given time, you think, suppose you have thermal radiation at infinity. And so you can say that, well, the wavelength, just make the approximation. You can do it much more precisely, make the approximations that photons are coming out at that wavelength. So you count the number of photons that are going out, and count the number of modes up here, and the number of modes vastly exceeds the photons that
Is the scenario then compatible with the remnant, for instance?
Say it again.
Is this scenario is compatible with remnant's idea, for instance?
So this is a remnant, but not a remnant in the usual sense. It's not usual ideas about remnant have to do with the remnant, which is a small object.
Yeah.
These are objects whose surface area is small, so from the outside world they're small, but on the other hand they're huge, absolutely huge. I mean, this local field theory ideas that what people think about as big point particles, that is not at all.
I think this is still, I think still is what usually would be called a remnant, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it looks
exactly.
small from the outside,
Usually this
has
is
very
the-
low energy, but carries a lot of entropy. I think
Sure,
that's
but
the
the statement is
definition.
that the effective field theory methods that I use are not applicable.
No, but let me put it in the other ways. I mean, this is a counter-argument against the counter-arguments against remnant. That's what I'm
That's correct. It's counter exactly saying that the usual counter argument assumes that that because the area is small, that means that particle-like objects, and I can use local field theory. There's a counter argument saying that no, that is not clear. That you can do. These are still, people are developing these ideas. That people.
When does the process stop of your theory?
Yeah, so that happens. That has to do with really the quantum region up here. So I can tell you my prejudice, but I can use supporting arguments, but it's far from me. My thing is that it actually starts because this dynamical horizon, there is quantum geometry, but outside, I would like to believe, we still have good classical geometry up here. I can still talk about the surface, and when the area of that surface is zero, it becomes very, very small, maybe, I don't know, exponentially small. Maybe it's finite, maybe finite time, maybe it actually takes infinite time to actually, for the area to actually become zero up here. So during this phase, what is going to come out are these extremely long wavelength modes. This is therefore reminiscent of what Hawking, Strominger, and Perry are saying about these infrared issues, but they are not the same infrared issues, but they are related to those infrared issues. These are going to be extremely long wavelength modes that will come out. So this is the kind of ideas that people are pursuing. This is not something that is finished work, but I wanted to start from the beginning 10 years ago and come to what people are thinking now. Please.
How long does it take to grow to 10 to 79 light years?
Yeah. So this is about the same as the evaporation time, MQ. So what is it? 10 to 55.
79 years, right?
It takes 79 years?
Correct.
No. It takes about 10 to the, what is it?
10 to the 79 years. Isn't
10
it?
to the 55, 10 to the 60
For a solar
years.
mass.
For a solar mass initial black hole.
I see, because that seems like a pretty big distance.
Yeah, so this is a huge distance, right? And it takes a long time.
And
so
I'm
if
an
you just
astronomer.
wanted to,
You know,
yeah.
so.
So, I mean, these are all questions of principle, right? I mean, that we're talking
For
about.
primordial black holes, it would be short.
Right. So this paper particularly, as usual, I'm very slow in writing down, but these people have written down the paper. It's in physical review. They're using maximal slicing, which I think are better, and they actually have looked at just give the estimates. My time is up, so let me just summarize. Quasi-local horizons provide a powerful tool to analyze issues that arise in black hole dynamics. I know I got everybody excited by the very last part, but I want to emphasize that the first parts are also important, and there are some issues there that should be clarified, so that's why I'm re-emphasizing that. These quasi-local horizons are used widely in numerical relativity to extract physics from numerical simulations. In fact, current simulations work almost entirely with dynamical and isolated horizons. Event horizons are rarely even computed. In the early days, people used to compute the event horizon, show that it's there. Now they don't even worry about it. They just look at the dynamical horizon, and the end stage of the dynamical horizon would be the end stage of the event horizon. And an early stage of event horizon, where it's still teleological, people don't even bother to plot anymore. For black hole mechanics, these quasi-local horizons provide stronger and more detailed relations than the standard first law for killing horizons, and the second law, sorry for the typos, for event horizons. They are also being used to analyze conceptual issues as to how outgoing gravitational waves can retain memory of black hole dynamics that produce them. And quantum theory, they could play a central role in answering the thorny questions about black hole evaporation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ashtekar. Questions? Yes.
So, Abhay,
Yeah.
this dynamical horizon,
Yeah.
it's got the same area theorem, right? The area cannot decrease, only increases. So correspondingly, can you now say that it has an entropy and a temperature and all of those things?
Yeah. So we
Do
could
they
ask,
all transfer?
wait, there are two questions here. The first is that these what I derived here were laws of black hole mechanics. There is no h bar in it.
I know.
So therefore, we see that delta E is equal to kappa times theta. So in order to get the temperature interpretation, I have to multiply kappa by h bar, and I have to put h bar in the denominators to talk about area in Planck units to talk about entropy. Yeah, so I could do that. I can do that. But now the second question would be that, well, if I have Hawking evaporation, then do I see these things? Now in the spherical symmetric case, the answer is yes, they will be fine. I don't know the general case because we don't have so much control with dynamical horizons, rotating things, black holes being formed and so on and so forth. But in the spherical symmetric case, you could give the same.
Right. No, the spherical is easy. Yeah. I was just thinking, in general, this could have any shape, right?
Right. So the statement is the statement is that laws are true for anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And this particular. But now the question is really whether I could transfer these laws of mechanics into laws of thermodynamics by associating temperature and area. Now, Hawking did that by using Hawking effect, right? And there we actually calculated. But he only calculated the spherical symmetric case, and then he just argued that, well, same thing should be too much more generally. What I'm just saying is that the same calculation can be used to make the argument in the spherical symmetric case here, but I do not know how to do the calculation in the non-spherical symmetric case, but neither is it done in the other case.
How would you, even as a matter of principle, identify a temperature with one of these dynamical horizons? Because the system can be very, very far from equilibrium. And
That would be the local kappa, right?
but I'm just saying that it shouldn't even necessarily be defined when the system's very far from equilibrium.
So laws of mechanics, there is a kappa, and the same law is true. But the question that we ask is, can we make the thermodynamic interpretation? It's a bit like what we do for the universe. We assign temperature, even though it is time dependent. And sometimes people go even the very early universe and still talk about time
Right,
dependence.
but there's a well-defined notion of temperature in statistical mechanics.
Right.
And that's a system that applies to systems that are suitably close to thermal equilibrium.
Right.
This one is not necessarily.
I'm saying for the same reason I'm saying your objection is, I agree with your objection, but our objection is also applicable to cosmology, where people widely use temperature, even though the statistical mechanical arguments are not applicable. So here, the statement would be that if you have slowly evolving horizons, which Booth and Ferris have looked at in great detail, in that case, I think one could use even the statistical mechanical argument. They have done the Hamiltonian analysis, so we could actually look at E to the minus beta h and so on in that case. And if it is completely, very fast thing, then we get into this problem about non-equilibrium statistical mechanics, what do I mean by temperature, what do I mean by entropy, and these are, I agree with you. So, laws of mechanics are true in general. Whether we can make a thermodynamic interpretation for slowly varying horizons, I think we can, although I have completed it, but the Hamiltonian framework, everything for this other case, I agree with you.
So let me, you kind of alluded to this, but let me try to ask in more detail.
Please.
So when people compute, the LIGO signal or whatever, they're obviously not studying the event horizon, but there's some region that they draw, surface that they draw on, it kind of wiggles around and settles down. So
That's the dynamical horizon.
I mean, is it precisely the thing that you're
Precisely
talking
the
about
dynamical
here?
horizon. I mean, late stage of dynamical horizon, right?
Yeah.
Because to begin with, there are two dynamical horizons. They also have those
They're
two.
just solving the initial value problem.
Yeah, exactly. So the statement is that there are these two, these two marginal trap surfaces, which are going around, and then at one stage, one develops which is outside that.
And it's just a surface with zero expansion. That's
With zero expansion, and the other one is negative.
Yeah.
One is zero, and the other one is negative.
Yeah.
And it is a space-like surface. It is precisely dynamical horizon. That's exactly what happened. So this is what I meant by here.
Yeah.
This is what I meant.
Okay.
I think I should. I'm here the whole day, so I'll be here if anybody wants to. I guess we have one appointment already, but if you want to discuss something else, I'm around.
All right, so let's thank Professor Ashtekar.
All right, so our last speaker for the term is going to be Max Attems from Barcelona, who's going to tell us about fast hydrodynamization, that's a tough word to say, and non-conformal holographic shock waves.
It's easier.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be able to visit this new institute here. I have, of course, first to thank the Mare Nostrum for the computing time, the supercomputer in Barcelona. As my title indicates, this is about the early out of equilibrium stage from heavy ion collision, and I will update you on the latest development from laboratory. This is work done in collaboration with Jorge Casaderes-Solano from Oxford, David Matias from Barcelona, Johannes Bartolin-Mitru from CISA, Carlos Sopuerta from ELISA, and my postdoc colleagues Iago Bea, Miguel Zilao, and two students, Aniel Santos and Miguel. So this talk is about two very distinct subjects, but thanks to strings theory, there's a bridge between hadron collisions on the one hand side and the creation of black holes. So the gauge gravity correspondence allows us to learn how the approach of hydrodynamics of this hadronic mass goes on, and Paulo already gave a talk on this, and I will remind you of the view from theory of an heavy ion collision. One thinks of it in three different stages. The first stage is the out of equilibrium stage. Then most of the lifetime is in the Colloquium plasma, and once the temperature cools down sufficiently, you get hot hadron gas, which in the end you have all the particles that blend into your detector. So here you have depicted from the Ohio group this cartoon where you see the two ultra-relativistically stretched heavy ion approaching each other, and there is not much said about the pre-equilibrium stage, because this is very ongoing research. What is mostly known is QGP lifetime and the later hadronization of the particles. So this is 10 to 10 minus 23 seconds is a typical lifetime of this system, and the pre-equilibrium should be much faster than this.
So this period that you're talking about, where hydrodynamics applies, is only lasting 10 times the characteristic light crossing time.
Yeah. So this is
it's not really a long period.
It's not a long period in our daily life.
No, but even in this light crossing time, it's only 10 times.
Yes, sure.
So it's not a long time.
Well, it's just the diameter of the nucleus, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you say it's collisional and it's hydrodynamics, usually you need particles to cross the system many times in order for it to be hydrodynamics.
No, you don't need so many particles. So there was Wilke in the audience who calculated this for very strongly coupled, and you just need a small number of ion gas particles
Sometimes
to
even
have
light,
this hydrodynamics.
even at the speed of light, you get one crossing.
But the mean free path in the system is very small.
Fine, but the system is all one side of the system doesn't know about the other side. Barely knows about the other side.
Sure.
And still it's hydrodynamic.
Yeah, so the mean free path is, small compared to the system size.
Sure, but only locally is the mean free path map. But the system as a whole doesn't know, one side doesn't know about the other.
Well, I don't think you're not saying that the whole thing is in equilibrium. It's hydrodynamic, so it's sort of locally in equilibrium, but there can be flows and stuff. It's not.
But how many particles do we have in total?
Thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah.
So it's a small number.
So if you take this pretty good, I don't know.
No,
One over
because
1,000.
10 cubed is exactly 1,000. So within one.
But I don't. There are really no quasi-particles in this system that are well defined. It's just a quantum soup
Of 1,000 particles.
Well, what comes out are thousands of particles, but the actual ball of plasma.
So how many particles are in the plasma?
I don't think it's a well-defined question.
Oh, it's not well defined.
Yeah, you don't know. So I mean, also the lifetime of this is an assumption. So the constraint from hydro goes from 1/10 to double of this time. So it's not yet fully constrained. But I will come to this.
Maybe you can add that you really need these hydrodynamic simulations to kind of explain all the Fourier anemonics in experimental data.
I will come to this. I will come to hydrodynamics description of this stage.
I guess you get another factor of 9 from n squared, right? So that can
It's still not a strong.
So as we've been already starting to speak about hydro, let me quickly remind you about the basics of hydro. So it's just an assumption of conservation of energy momentum, and it's typically formulated as isotropic expansion around equilibrium. Also, we nowadays know that it's applicable even when the first order correction are of order 1. The important transport properties of this fluid is the shear viscosity eta and bulk viscosity zeta. So the shear viscosity is very simply depicted the fluid resistance to a plate moving above it, and the shear viscosity. The bulk viscosity is even simpler to explain. It's just the slowdown of the expansion of a fluid in any direction. Wilke was asking me to show some nice observables that are matched by hydro. This is the corresponding slide. So this is corresponds to the second stage. So these are properties of the QGP. It was found very, very early that in order to match flow observables, one needs to assume early hydrodynamization. And soon after that, when viscous hydrocodes became available, it was found that the QGP is almost a nearly perfect liquid. So the black dots that you see here are weak data, and the best match from this different values for the shear viscosity over the entropy density is 0.08, the red line. Nowadays, the hydro models can also incorporate the bulk viscosity, and there one sees that the transverse pressure of here this is Ellis measurement dots for protons, kaons, and pions, and the solid lines are simulations that incorporate both shear and bulk, whereas this dashed line with this region is only shear viscosity, and you see that we get a better agreement with this bulk viscosity. So this is in order to have a better understanding of the QGP. What my talk is about how to go to the QGP. And what you want is you need to solve a multi-body QCD problem. And so your typical tools at hand is lattice QCD, but they need lots of computing power for the equilibrium, the static aspect, and they have not yet computed the transport properties of QCD. So one doesn't know eta and zeta of QCD yet. It's work in progress, and hopefully soon one will learn this, but it's not yet known from lattice QCD. Also, classical aspects one can learn from kinetic theory, and for weak coupling one has perturbative tools at hand. The thing is, those are limited for high temperature, and what we are interested on is strongly coupled dynamics. So the question that we want to ask is how long is this first stage, and what determines when hydrodynamics is applicable, and what are the initial conditions for the QGP, so that the end goal is to have a very nice simulation where you can give the stress energy tensor to your hydro friend, and he would just evolve it and then get very nice observables out. So Wilke has already done first steps in this direction.
There is another context where this might be relevant, and that's the early universe. Is there any observable consequence there?
I'm
during
not
the QCD phase.
You mean for the hot at the millisecond after the Big Bang?
Whatever you find here,
Yeah.
does it have any consequences, observational consequences for the QCD phase?
Well, what we learned is that previously people were thinking that one has a first order phase transition, whereas nowadays one knows that it's just a crossover transition, that QCD is non-conformal, but that one has only a crossover transition. So I think there are lots of things to learn, and it's an exciting topic. Also the parenthesis. At the last Quark Matter conference, the most exciting were ultra-peripheral heavy ion collisions, where the heavy ions are as ultra-peripheral that you have no overlap between them, but you have one who emits a photon and the other guy emits also a photon, and then you have a very high energetic photon-to-photon interaction where you can probe QED at GeV scale. So there were just 16 events of this, but with higher statistics, one is interested to probe modification of QED at very high energies. So this is also a second new ongoing topic. What I will use is the gauge gravity duality. So I will use it as toolkit. It's the simulation will be on the gravity side, and I will learn about the behavior on the gauge part. Of course, the famous example is 2B string theory on ADS5 cross S5, which corresponds to n equal 4 Young-Mills. And the famous prediction who came out of this theory is that eta over S is equal 1 over 4 pi. And you will remember this was the best fit for the Colloquium plasma. And it's currently the data I was showing you was data from 2005 from Rick, but this value is still a preferred value from ongoing experiments. The band is from slightly below this value up to 2 times this value. So let me allow you to show you old school real-time simulation of colliding shockwaves. So this is the energy density of two shock waves, and this is the direction of the collision, and this is the energy density, which is not rescaled. So at the point where they overlap, it overshoots. And let me point out that it's directly computed here. In the background, it's solving the Einstein equation, while it's the GPU is rendering the data of this shock waves.
So these are gravitational shock waves?
Yes.
I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're gravitational waves.
Yeah. Yeah, they are Gaussian packets. As you saw, they have a certain haze and a certain width, and these are pure gravity shock waves. They produce a plasma in the forward region, as you can see here. In so what I was showing you in were 2D cuts of this 3D visualization of a typical shockwave collision. So here you have the time, and this is the collision axis, and you read off the energy density and the pressure just from geometric components.
Why is black hole equivalent to QGP?
Why?
Yeah, I mean, it's just not obvious to someone that didn't work in this field why a collision of gravitational waves is equivalent to heavy ion. How do you make the connection between black holes and QGP?
What you need is you want a fast hydrodynamization, you want almost nearly perfect fluid, and you want to study out of equilibrium. And this is a very nice toolkit who allows you to do this.
There's a simpler analysis answer, which is that you want to create entropy.
Right, but I can do it with matter colliding, or with, why do I?
Your only degrees
just
of freedom
gravity.
here are just gravity, so the only thing you can do is create a black hole. It's a classical theory you're describing. The only thing that has entropy in the
But
classical
I can
theory
have
is
two black holes colliding.
you could do that,
So
but then you're colliding two
what is
objects that have
equivalent to?
entropy, whereas he's starting off colliding pure states.
You want to start with zero entropy and generate entropy. Okay, that's the argument.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, of course, this is just general relativity, so in that sense, string theory doesn't play any role. I mean, you got it, but I think
So the interpretation is thanks to holography, but I use it only as toolkit. And what I solve is numerical GR. Yes. So the important results who kickstarted this field is a seminal work by Paul, where one found that one has fast hydrodynamization, and he also did the first characteristic formulation in AES5. And what was striking for most people was that they assumed when Hydra applies that the transverse pressure and the longitudinal pressure would also be isotropized. But this was one of the first works who showed that this ratio is very different from 1 when you hydrodynamize. This opens the floodgates, and other people who were already studying isotropization together with Wilke, Jorge, Michael, and David, they started to play with this parameter of the initial shock waves, and found that the thin shock waves behaves very similar in the sense that the hydrodynamize also fast, and one can relate the initial energy transverse unit area to as a proxy of having shocks for different energies at RIC or at LHC. So one of the findings was that this dimensionless parameter, the time of the hydrodynamization and the temperature of the hydrodynamization is smaller than 1/2. And this is what I just told you. And here, of course, the typical energy density of the shockwave. Now, this was for conformal theories. We know that QCD is non-conformal, so we have to find a way to break it. And a simple way to do it is to add a scalar with a non-trivial potential. This is our 5-dimensional bottom-up models that we have been studying. So it has the advantages to have both ADS in the infrared and in the UV. And on the gauge theory, those are fixed points. And the breaking happens with the RG flow in between.
Where does the potential come from?
The potential is, you have, of course, the negative cosmological constant. Some parts are given by the holographic renormalization procedure. And here we have one parameter who defines your theory for the higher terms.
This
and now it's just chosen.
It's not top-down.
It's a bottom-up, but it's top-down in the sense that we had chosen it to be a GPPZ flow in the small field limit. So it has certain string theory ingredients chosen by David. But yeah, it's a bottom-up model.
But there could be many different potentials in principle.
There is
a whole space of functions that you can choose from.
Sure.
And why would we believe just this choice to give the right answer?
No, I'm not saying it's the right answer. It was just a simple way of breaking non-conformality.
Sure, but you can break it in many different ways. So how do you know that the answer you get is unique?
So the thing is, you need also to take into account the numerical problems. Nobody had done this yet. And so we were very happy to have ADS in the UV and ADS in the infrared.
Okay.
Because this way we could recover easily known
but it's
quantities.
Not unique. It's one example, but it's not necessarily unique.
No, it's not unique and it's not matched to QCD.
Okay.
But I mean, there are a bunch of coefficients there. Like, how do you pick those coefficients? I'm somehow missed what's the problem this potential is trying to solve?
Right, that's my question.
Well, he wants non-conformal.
Why?
Because QCD.
But QCD is non-conformal.
Well, I mean,
at TC. So the Colloquium cluster, the Colloquium plasma is at several temperatures around TC, and there you have a strong non-conformal behavior as lattice QCD shows us for their computation of the interaction
so you
measure.
say more than, I mean, so in weak coupling it's just logarithmically non-conformal, who cares? But you're saying in strong coupling it's more non-conformal?
Yeah, so it's a very important feature of QCD around the critical temperature.
Yeah,
if you cool down your system.
But you're not actually trying to get like the asymptotically free regime, right? You're just
So all of this is deconfined, yeah.
But still strongly coupled, I think.
Yes.
But Einstein Lagrangian itself is not conformally negative, right? So
yeah, but it's the ADS symmetry is
yeah.
He wants to have ADS not be a solution.
So we're working for the CFT.
so it's the ground state is conformally negative.
Yeah.
But the simple answer is you do what you can do, and then you change it and see how things change later on.
But I still don't know, what is the profile of the scalar that you're trying to achieve? By
So the profile of the scalar is you have a maximum in UV and a minimum in the infrared, and this gives you a very nice view that you have on the gravity picture in the UV you have an ADS with a certain radius, and in the infrared I have an ADS with a smaller radius. And in between, I get just a region who interpolates between those two.
And this was the simplest potential that
Right,
those
Well, it's coming from a superpotential. It's
one example.
Yeah.
Oh. ADS soliton, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You want also your shockwaves to behave solitonic. So you don't want your shockwaves to have to excite the scalar before they collide.
But what worries people is that you're looking for the keys under the lamppost. You say, okay, I have one lamppost that I can look under.
No, but, I mean, people have been, Paul including, using a zeta with 0. So this is a straight line here. And here we are showing a strong deviation of this. and this is interesting by itself.
We should probably move on for time constraints.
Let me skip this. So one thermodynamical properties who is different is speed of sound, where you see that it's strongly non-conformal. Then, depending on our single parameter, we can choose it to be less non-conformal or more, or increase the non-conformal breaking, depending on it. And this you see also on the zeta. Let me remind you that the word identity now is not directly relating the pressure with the energy density, but the scalar can fluctuate on its own, which is depicted on your left with the different values of the equilibrium pressure. If you have questions concerning the quasi-normal modes, ask me after the talk. This is shockwave and non-conformal shockwave collision with longitudinal pressure and transverse pressure. And here is the hydrodynamization, which you define as longitudinal pressure minus the extracted prediction of first order hydro. And when this is less than a certain amount that you can define, you can say either 5 or 10 or 20%. This is arbitrarily chosen. Then hydrodynamization happened. Now that we have also the bulk viscosity, there's a different channel, which is the equation of statization, or short, the AOization. And this is when your average pressure minus the equilibrium pressure divided by the average pressure is less than 1%. And this is governed by the traceless contribution of your bulk viscosity component. So in this example, this 10% happens much later. And let me remind you that hydrodynamization is also not equal isotropization. So at any point of hydrodynamization or AOization, the longitudinal pressure and the transverse pressure are very different. Now we instead of having one single temperature, we can do a full temperature scan of this theory and extract the different hydrodynamization times of this. If this would be conformal, you would get one value, which is this, and the AOization time would be minus infinity. So what is interesting is that you get a crossover, and that you can look for how much bulk viscosity is needed for the system to have non-conformal behavior. And what we found is that the required zeta is less than 1/10 of what the hydro people assume for QCD to have non-conformal effects, where the equation of state, well, AOS time happens after the hydrodynamization. And of course, this ordering depends on your bulk viscosity. We not only have this AOization time, we can also look at when the condensate relaxes. Here you have depicted the value of the condensate, and what you see is that these shock waves highly excited, which you expect because it's out of equilibrium process. And now we have 3 different times. With 3 different times, you have 6 different possibilities. So out of these 6 possibilities, which one would you assume we cannot realize? It's the one where hydrodynamization is the latest, because this happens. This happens very fast, and also the second physical reason is to have hydrodynamization after the condensate relaxation. We need a very strongly non-conformal setup, and this pushes, due to the big zeta component, this pushes the AOization to a late time. So these are two orderings that we miss. And here are depicted this evolution of the scalar condensate for these 4 different ordering. As I'm running out of time, I will just shortly mention that we were also able to study the Gregory-Laflamme instability. This is very exciting because you have, with this scalar potential, you get to a final quasi-static solution which shows this spinodal instability where you have the system wanting to go to its stable, from an unstable phase energy down to its stable phase, and as the energy content has to stay the same, you get this inhomogeneous horizon, and not the pinching off of the black holes as you would expect from Gregory-Laflamme usually. So, thank you very much for your attention.
Probably a very naive question. You're talking about hydrodynamics, whatever we mean by that. But before hydrodynamics is important, I mentioned it's important on large scale, but when you go down to the particle separation scale, comparable to that, kinetic instabilities are important. Do you take into account any kind of kinetic instability, like streaming particles, one into another, producing colored fields and all that?
The next, what we are colliding is just a chunk of energies which have no internal structure. In fact, of course, the heavy ions have holes and all kind of structures. So this is very much improvable. Also, they are not Gaussian. So you can think of better objects to collide, and it is possible because Paul showed that you can collide them in full 5-dimensional setup, and there one could create also nice fluctuation on top. But this at this stage it's not incorporated. It's a very good question.
So the real experiment where these 2 ions are colliding, you're treating it as an incompressible fluid, is that right? Or what are you saying about this fluid?
So it's a. So I mean.
It's a quark-gluon plasma. That I understand.
Yeah, it's radiation.
What else does it do?
Equation of state is radiation.
Does it can it squeeze or?
I mean, it expands, and you have all kinds of probes of it. So you have people are very interested in photons because you get photons of all different stages, and they are not influenced by the medium. So one question one gets is if you can compute for your setup the photon rate that you get, because also the initial stage has a very high photon emission. So this would be interesting experimental probes. The thing is that we think backwards. I mean, also stuff ends in the collider, and then you reconstruct your event. At first, you don't know.
I'm not even asking what the observer sees. Because I want to have a picture of what this guy is doing.
Yeah.
You're making this fluid where the 2 guys collided, and then you're trying to understand the physics of that fluid by colliding some gravitational waves, right?
No, we want to know the creation of this fluid. So we are interested in the out of equilibrium that leads to the creation of this fluid, because everybody has every known and good working hydro group assumes that this pre-equilibrium happens super fast in order to be able to match to all kinds of observers.
So Ramesh's question leads me to ask, what does the formation stage of the heavy ion soup correspond to on the gravity side?
That's the question. Yes.
Well, this in this setup, it's the shock waves.
It's the waves?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's two
you
sets
have
of waves that are...
chunks of shock waves, gravity shock waves who collide in each other.
But here it's really scalar shock wave, right? And you're giving the data for the scalar field, and that's how you can change something like that. But then
this is in order to break the non-conformality. They also have.
There's a question that I was asking before that I didn't understand the answer to. So Einstein's equation is not conformal in volume. I agree, anti-de Sitter is. But on the other hand, if you give me an initial data which has strong gravitational waves in it, right? That system is not conformally valid. Right? The Sitter maybe, but this solution has not conformally values because it's just.
Yeah, but these simulations are done in anti-de Sitter.
But what do you mean? I mean, it's a non-linear, right? It's not anti-de Sitter, and it's not a test field. Or is it test field? Maybe that's what I understand.
Well, it's in asymptotic anti-de Sitter space, right?
Right.
And the group that preserves asymptotic of ADS is also a conformal group. It's not only the exact isometries of ADS is conformal group, but also the symmetries that preserve asymptotic is a conformal group. And so he's considering non-ADS asymptotic ADS solutions.
So you want to break the in the gravity side, you want to break the conformal invariance all the way to infinity. So it's not enough to just have some theta. But I could consider gravitational waves which go out to infinity.
Yeah, okay. But here that solutions are asymptotic, preserving the asymptotic.
So that's the same.
So why don't we save the remaining questions for 4:30 and pizza and thank our speaker again.